Hey everybody, it is You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week my first question comes from Jim Bailey, who says, what do you think about commercials on YouTube? Personally, I unsubscribe if it happens more than once. I have the exact opposite reaction. If we're dealing with a YouTuber whose work I enjoy, who I subscribe to, who I watch a lot, I try to make sure to always watch the ads if the video has ads on it. Commercials on YouTube are very important. In fact, the Bible Reloaded left a comment on your question on my video last week and said basically the same thing that I'm going to tell you, which is putting ads on videos is a major source of income for YouTubers. In fact, for most people, it's the primary source of income that they derive from their videos. So you can complain about the commercials if you like, but keep in mind that those commercials are what enables some of your favorite YouTubers to do what they do, including me. I earn a good chunk of my living from the ad revenue that I earn from the ads I put on my videos. And you can see how upsetting it is to my cat that even the possibility of losing ad revenue is being brought up, because I mean that's food out of her mouth. You know, do you want me to be able to feed my cat? Then, you know, don't be too hard on YouTubers who put ads on their videos. It's really not that big of a deal. Ads have been on TV forever. We're used to them, and ads on YouTube videos are far less lengthy and intrusive than ads on television shows. So I don't think that the ads are a bad thing, and I think for people like me and like a lot of other folks who do YouTube full-time or close to full-time or derive a significant portion of their income from it, the ads are very, very important. Captain Andy, a question about science fiction. Do you prefer with aliens or without? In my opinion, humanity is diverse enough in itself for us not to need to bring aliens into the equation in order to try and tell an interesting story with interesting characters, and it saves us having to suspend our disbelief when presented with people in latex masks who are supposed to be beings from another planet. On the other hand, aliens do look kind of cool, if not at all convincing. What are your thoughts? I mean, it depends on what kind of story it is. If it's like a space opera, Star Trek, Star Wars kind of thing, then of course the goofy aliens are just part of the show, and I accept them and I enjoy them as just, you know, a trope in that kind of a story. Now, if we're talking about a really serious science fiction story, then yeah, I kind of do prefer stories that don't have aliens. Not because I think that aliens don't exist, because I think the universe is so big, there's probably aliens out there somewhere. But our imagination goes to such silly, corny places so quickly that usually when we try to imagine aliens, even in a serious sci-fi story, we end up coming up kind of short. I think probably the best use of aliens in what I would call a serious science fiction film would be in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where you never even see the aliens. The aliens are just implied through their artifacts or through the effects that they have on the characters, but you never actually see aliens walking around doing stuff. I think there's a reason why Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke chose not to show us any aliens in 2001: A Space Odyssey, even though there were, I think in early versions of that story, there were intentions to have the aliens be actually an on-screen part of the story, but they decided not to show the aliens. And I think one of the reasons why is because they wanted the story to be taken seriously and to maintain a very serious tone throughout, and they couldn't figure out a way to maintain this serious, realistic tone with aliens running around. So for serious sci-fi, I think I probably would prefer no aliens. Mechanical Menace. What do you think to the argument that anyone in a majority group is automatically privileged, so can't be oppressed at all? I hear this argument a lot from our fellow atheists regarding certain religious groups, but women and the working classes have always been majorities that have been or still are being oppressed. Then there's groups like Indians in the British Empire days, Kurds in parts of the world, etc. Does that argument actually have any merit you can see beyond Christians in America or Europe, or is it just a catchy phrase that doesn't really pan out when actually thought about? It's not numbers alone. I think numbers can have a lot to do with it in certain situations, but it's power. It's the amount of power that a group has in a culture, in a society. That's what determines whether or not they can be oppressed. And power can be derived from being in the majority in terms of number of people, but it can also be derived from being the people that are in control of the institutions that influence life in your society. And the other thing to keep in mind is that oppression is not a simple concept, and it's not something that occurs based on a single identity that a person has, as though that identity exists in a vacuum. You know, there are women in the world who are also incredibly privileged because maybe they have wealth, you know, or they come from a privileged racial class. So they may be underprivileged relative to other people in those classes because maybe the ultra wealthy men have it better than the ultra wealthy women, but it's difficult on the big picture to look at those ultra wealthy women as being terribly underprivileged compared to, say, women who are from a lower economic class or women from a different, less privileged racial category. These categories all overlap, and you can be privileged in some and oppressed in others. So the concept of oppression has to be considered in its real world context. And that's why I say that I personally, you know, the only category that I fall into that has ever really been considered underprivileged is the fact that I'm an atheist. And I'm so privileged in pretty much every other category that I identify with that I don't feel underprivileged. I suppose I could compare atheism to, you know, Christianity, which would be the dominant religion in the United States, and say, yes, I'm underprivileged in that sense, but I don't feel that. I don't experience that. And that's the way it is for a lot of people. You might be a member of a privileged category. Let's say you might be a white person, but you don't feel privileged in your life because you're also very poor. You know, so privilege and oppression are very complex issues, and it's not as simple as who has the majority of the population. Yarrow Kassir, what is your take on the Kim Davis situation? Do you think she should have resigned? Do you think she'll get out of jail and do her job, or will she be held in contempt for a long time? What's your opinion on her supporters? Obviously, Yarrow asked this question before Kim Davis was released from jail under the compromise that she wouldn't have to put her name on the marriage licenses. That turned out to be what she wanted. She sort of let that slip after this controversy had been going for a couple of days. All I wanted was to be able to take my name off the marriage licenses for the gay people. Now, I personally think even that compromise is too much. I would not have given in even that much. I would have said, you can either do your job, or you can resign from your job and let someone else do it, or you can sit in jail forever. That would have been the choice I gave her. Because she brought this on herself. Nobody forced her into this situation. She had the choice. If she realized that she was no longer able to reconcile her conscience and her religious beliefs with the duties of her job, then she had a choice. She could either continue to do her job and compromise her conscience, or she could stay true to her conscience and resign her position. And yes, she is an elected official, and part of the line has been from her and from her lawyers at the Liberty Council, oh, she didn't want to resign because the people chose her, the people elected her, and they want her in this position. The fact that the people chose her to be in that position does not mean she is entitled to keep it forever. And if she realizes that she is incapable of discharging the duties of the position that the people elected her to, then the responsible thing is to resign. And she chose not to do that. She chose to attempt to make herself into a martyr, which is ridiculous, because how can you be a martyr for a cause that you trumped up to begin with? And how can you be a martyr and think of yourself as noble when the whole reason you're supposedly trying to martyr yourself is because you think you should have the right to deny people something they're legally entitled to because you think they shouldn't have it? So those are my thoughts on the Kim Davis situation. I would not have given in to her an inch. I would have forced her to make a choice. I really don't see what interest is being served by allowing someone like her to return to work under this compromise that, well, she just doesn't have to put her name on the marriage licenses. She had the choice between doing her job or resigning, and she refused to make that choice. So I think she should have been forced to make that choice or to stay in jail on that contempt charge, and I have no pity for her. American Muslim girl. Steve, how do you think believers and atheists can work together to make our communities and our world better? I think we have to get past the question of belief and move on to what's next. People will believe or not believe. We will be like that forever. If Dawkins is right and we evolved to believe in God in order to face mortality, then religious belief will always be there. I think he said that. So how do we move the conversation and the culture forward? How do we move past arguing? I would love it if atheists, non-religious folks in general, and religious people, specifically moderate religious people, would find a way to focus on the things we have in common. Because when you take a typical secular person, a typical non-religious person, and a typical religious moderate, there's way more that we agree on than we disagree on. And most of the stuff we disagree on is of the nature that we could argue about it over the dinner table, we could argue about it over coffee, and hopefully we could have a respectful but, challenging conversation about it and come out respecting each other on the other end and maybe having a little bit of a better understanding of why each of us thinks the way we do and has come to the conclusions we've come to. And we can part friends. We can agree to disagree amicably, and then we can focus on the stuff that we agree on. I think there's so much wasted effort and so much counterproductive energy spent by many of my fellow atheists on deliberately antagonizing moderate religious people. If there was one common, new atheist talking point that I could just magically wipe away and we would never hear again, it would be this line of, well, religious moderates are just as bad as fundamentalists. Or in some cases, religious moderates are even worse than fundamentalists. If I never hear that again, it will be too soon. It's not that the religious moderates are less wrong empirically than the fundamentalists. Because even religious moderates, like say a moderate Christian, still believes things about, the resurrection of Christ or about the existence of God that I just don't think are true. I just don't think those things are true. I think that even moderate Christianity is a false religion. But even though they're just as empirically false as their more extremist cousins in Christianity, they're far more morally correct. And I would rather focus on how morally correct moderate Christians are compared to fundamentalist Christians than the other stuff. If I see a Christian or a Muslim or a member of any faith, and they are someone who sees their faith as a motivation to do good, as a motivation to help the less fortunate, and they don't see their faith as an excuse to be bigoted, to be homophobic or racist or transphobic or whatever, and they try to use their religion as a motivation to make the world a better place, why in the world would I want to make an enemy of that person? That makes no sense to me at all. It never has, and I don't think it ever will. So that's one thing we can do. We as atheists can stop picking fights we don't need to fight against people who should not be our enemies but should be our allies. It doesn't mean we agree with them on everything. It doesn't mean that we never challenge their religious beliefs. It doesn't mean that we hush up and we don't talk about atheism or we don't contradict religious beliefs when they come in the room. It just means we treat them with respect and we treat them as friends and not as enemies. Malevolent divinity. Do you think people in counter-revolutionary movements like the Klan or the reactionary men's movement grasp the fact that they're fighting a losing battle in which they are the antagonistic forces? Or perhaps that the inevitable loss strikes them as a surprise? Because some strike me as the type who have that sense of self-awareness but are simply suppressing it, while others seem to be actively drinking that Kool-Aid. If both, which do you think is more common? It's hard to tell because I can't read people's minds, but my sense is that the first one is more common, the lack of self-awareness. Men's rights activists, Klan members, devoted members of bigoted causes, don't strike me as terribly thoughtful people. And it's not just because I disagree with them on something. Turned into Stuffy there a little bit, didn't I? It's not just because I disagree with them on something. It's because their worldview is so contrary to the sciences, to the biological and sociological facts that we are able to be confident about, that it's hard for me to think of them as really knowledgeable, thoughtful, curious people. If you can be so wrong, so epically wrong, that you find yourself embracing something like the Klan or the men's rights movement, then I don't think you're suppressing a self-awareness. I think you just lack it. Now, I'm sure there are some people, I do think it's both. I think there probably are some people who fall under that second category that you define, that they do have a sense that they're on the wrong side of this, and that their movement is doomed, that they are, as you say, the antagonists. They're the baddies, as Mitchell and Webb might say. Are we the baddies? Yes, MRAs, Klansmen, you are the baddies. Some of them might be aware of that and just sort of shove it to the side and try not to think about it. But most of them, I think, just don't, they lack that awareness. They just are not very thoughtful people. Francie Freeman. Dear Mr. Shives, my name is Francie, and I'm a nurse in a hospital in PA. My grandmother was a patient for a few months. She's an old lady around 86, and we were really close. Anyways, something bad happened, and her condition was getting worse, and her death was closing in day by day. About 5 hours before she died, we had a conversation, and she was telling me about her life, love, and fears, and she told me she wanted to go to heaven and see her husband and kids, and that she hoped she was a good enough person to go to heaven, even though she has made some terrible mistakes. I'm an atheist, she's Christian, but I felt so bad, and I couldn't find it within me to disagree with her. I actually encouraged her beliefs and told her she was going to heaven and Jesus is waiting with her family, to just trust God and Jesus. I told her not to worry because she will see them soon and she will be forgiven if she's sorry, and to just trust God and Jesus and that her family is waiting for her. 5 hours later, she died. Her heart failed. I feel odd about this because on one hand, I feel what was the harm of lying to her if it eased her pain and she was able to die in peace? But on the other hand, I feel like I lied. Even my atheist friends have different opinions. Some think it was okay to lie. Some others don't blame me for doing it, but think I should have been honest, at least about my personal beliefs or lack of. So, do you think I was wrong for doing this? If you were in my shoes and someone was dying, would you lie about Jesus and God and heaven to ease their pain and death if you knew it would make them happy and die with peace and hope? Thank you, Mr. Shives. Your videos help me feel better about my loss and shine a little light in my dark moments. Well, thank you very much for saying that, Francie. That nice bit about me at the end was very nice, was very appreciated. I think you did the right thing. I can't think of a single reason. I can't think of a single good that would have been done for you or for your grandmother if you had spent some of her final moments with you arguing with her about religion or sharing with her your lack of religious faith in that moment. At that point, I mean, maybe if it was 20 years ago and you and your grandmother were having a conversation and she was still in good health and you were talking to her about atheism or about your doubts about Christianity or whatever, that would be a really nice conversation to have, you know. But in the moment of her death, when she's scared and hoping to see her family again in the afterlife, you did exactly the right thing. There are times and places that are appropriate to have these conversations and to make these stands, and the final hours of a religious loved one's life, when you are a daughter, a granddaughter, it's not the time to do that. And I don't have any ill will toward people who maybe say something that they don't personally believe in if they feel that it will give some comfort to a person in their final moments. The people I have a problem with are those that sell these fantasies to people in the first place. You can't blame your grandmother for believing or wanting to believe that she's going to a place of everlasting peace and she's going to see Jesus and her family again, because that is something she's been told all her life by people who had no right to tell her that. because they don't know that that's true. You know, she has been made promises by people who have no right to make such promises. But by the time you get to age 86 and you're in the hospital and you're down to your last 5 hours, this is not the time to try and correct that lie or make up for that broken promise. You did the best thing you could have done, and I don't think you should feel bad about it, and I don't think you should listen to people who try to tell you that you should have done anything different. I think you did the compassionate, loving thing, and you did the best thing that you could have done in that situation. So, if it means anything to you, I think you did the right thing. And now I'm going to do the right thing and jump straight from that incredibly heartfelt question to
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Sire A No. Hey Steve, did you go on vacation this summer? If so, where did you go and what did you do? Also, would you ever do a Steve and Stuffy go to the beach or ballpark, county fair, etc. type episode? I didn't take a vacation so much. Ashley and I just took a weekend and just went out of town and stayed at a hotel. Which was really the closest to a vacation that we've done. You know, we stayed in the hotel and enjoyed the air conditioning and watched the TV and went to the pool and swam in the pool one day, and it was a really nice thing, but it was just a couple of days and it was really not even that far out of town, but that's what we did. And yes, I would totally do a Steve and Stuffy go to the beach or ballpark or county fair episode. Absolutely. Jay Lebrecht, Steve, why do you hate bigots? Doesn't that make you a meta bigot? No. I like to think of myself as hating bigotry more so than bigots, and I also like to think that that does not make me a meta bigot. It makes me a decent fucking person. Michael Allen, I noticed some cool books in the background. So what is the greatest graphic novel ever? I bounce back and forth from Watchmen to Kingdom Come. Thoughts? Well, if we're just sticking with superheroes, Watchmen is pretty damn close. Maybe another suggestion might be Marvels. I really loved Marvels when I read it, also many years ago. If we're expanding it to something more than just superhero comics, then there's a couple Will Eisner graphic novels that I would put up there. Life on Another Planet is great. And Mouse by Art Spiegelman is fucking fantastic and shattering, devastating. Drew White, cream-filled, frosted, or plain donuts? Cream-filled, preferably cream-filled and frosted, if that's an option. Riggs BF. Hey Steve, if you had to choose between watching one of the following, which would it be? Battlefield Earth, the Star Wars Holiday Special, The Room, or Star Trek V? The Room. If you had listed 4 pretty good movies and The Room, I might have picked The Room. I just love watching The Room. It is exquisite in its awfulness. Secular Scholar, all the times you talk about Star Trek, you leave out the animated series. What's up with that? That is just a thoughtless oversight on my part. I love the animated Star Trek show. In fact, the animated Star Trek show was the first Star Trek series that I owned. I owned the whole thing on DVD. Now, granted, it was only one box. It was just one season. But still, I owned the animated Star Trek on DVD before I owned any other version of Star Trek. I really like the animated Star Trek. Kevin Logan. Was Sir Mix-a-Lot's lack of ability to lie connected to his fondness for plum posteriors, or was he just a radical lyricist? Well, let's think about this. Let's break this down. He likes big butts, and he cannot lie. Now, this to me does not necessarily imply that there is any kind of causal link between the two. In other words, the fact that he cannot lie is not is not dependent on his love of big butts, or vice versa. So I think it's just a matter of him having both of these conditions at once, not necessarily that they are dependent on one another. That is my critical analysis of Sir Mix-a-Lot's lyrics. Andrew Lawrence, you meet someone who's never read or watched sci-fi. What 5 books and what 5 movies would you recommend? I'm going to skip books because I'm just much better at movies. If I could only recommend 5 sci-fi movies to someone who's never watched sci-fi before, I would probably go with Forbidden Planet, The Day the Earth Stood Still, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Star Wars, and Star Trek II. Radical Bacon. A bunch of white nationalist supremacist groups have endorsed Trump for president. How does that make you feel? I'm of two minds about it. On one hand, I am absolutely appalled and embarrassed that a candidate as loathsome and openly bigoted and hostile as Trump could be doing so well with so many people. But on the other hand, I am feeling a wonderful rush of schadenfreude at seeing the Republican Party's chickens finally come home to roost. Enjoy it, Republican National Committee, because in every possible way, you earned it. You earned every bit of Donald Trump. Colton Stokes, have you read What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way, and what did you think of it? Is it one of the best Superman or comic in general stories of the last 15 years, or is it overrated and overly moralizing? I mean, somewhere in the middle, but leaning toward the good end. I really like that story. I don't know if I would say it's one of the greatest Superman stories ever or whatever, but it was really good, and I wish that the people behind Man of Steel and the new Warner Brothers movie franchise would have read it and learned something. Sarah Santos. Steve, I have a quick lightning round question for you. Will you be attending the 2016 Reason Rally? Also, would you ever be interested in speaking at this type of event? Yes, I will be attending. It's only like an hour away from me. I attended the last one, and I will certainly be attending this one. And would I be interested in speaking at this type of event? Yes, absolutely. If I were invited to speak at a conference or participate in a panel or something, I would be totally down for that. I would love to do that. Corey Donaldson, have you ever listened to the rock band The Police, and what songs performed by them do you like best? My favorite songs by The Police are Roxanne, Message in a Bottle, Invisible Sun, and Wrapped Around Your Finger. I love all of those, Corey. I love The Police. To that list, I would only add King of Pain. Love King of Pain. My favorite Police song. One of my favorite songs, period. Hey, that's it for the lightning round. I'm almost done, but before I leave you, I want to give you someone else that you could turn to, perhaps in an hour of need, or maybe if you're just bored. I want to give a shout out to another YouTuber who has an awesome channel, and this week the shout out goes to Anubis2814. As the intro to most of Anubis's videos says, this is a channel devoted to religion, politics, science, and skepticism. Some of Anubis's recent videos have been about the topic of limited government, small government versus simple government, which was really interesting. A really great video he just put up a couple days ago on how to be a dick versus how to have a debate, which was excellent, very well written. And a really great video put up earlier this month, maybe last month, I can't remember the date exactly, but a relatively recent video about why it's ignorant and kind of fucked up to call black Christians Uncle Toms, and sort of the need to recognize black history and black culture before we say really stupid shit like, why are black people Christians? That's the religion that enslaved them. They're just a bunch of Uncle Toms. Let's not say fucked up, stupid, racist shit like that, okay? Anyway, Anubis2814, fucking awesome channel. Check it out. Deserves a look, deserves a subscription, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. I also want to remind you, as I always do, to check out the Lemme Listen podcasts from the demented yet brilliant mind of Jason Harding. You might know him as Jason with a D, the creator of Opinionville here on YouTube. Well, he does these awesome podcasts. They're all under the Lemme Listen umbrella. There's Lemme Finish that he does with Finite Atticus. There is American Monsters and How to Destroy Them. That is an awesome, hilarious improv comedy podcast about cryptozoology that is just great. And there is the movie review podcast, Late Seating, that Jason does with me. I'm Jason's co-host on Late Seating, and I invite you to listen to all of them. Our most recent episode of Late Seating went up last week. It was about Titanic. It was one of our best episodes, I think. Really, really great talk that we had about Titanic, a really fun show to listen to. So if you haven't listened to that, or you haven't listened to any of our Late Seating podcasts before, I would recommend you check that one out. Check out all of them. You can go to LemmeListenPodcasts.com and listen to those awesome, awesome shows. I highly recommend that. Well, that is it, everybody. I'm out of here, but before I go, as always, I want to urge you to please leave a comment on this video asking me a question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly, and I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So thank you for watching, and until the next video, take care, everybody.